This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, welcome to the world of web components again. So in this session, we are going to discuss about lifecycle hooks for LWC. Lifecycle hooks is something which is common word for many technologies. If you see AngularJS, if you see Aura components, if you see React.js, any technology that you take, there is a cycle which follows for every component, right? So even for Aura component, you have life cycle kind of. It starts with init method and it goes to render, it goes to after render. So it follows some process, right? So even for the web components, you have some life cycle hook. So these life cycle hooks says that, right? Which one starts first and which one comes next to that. There is a flow which is followed in LWC. So say for example, if you notice this diagram, whatever you have over here, right? So assuming you have parent and child components, right? You have parent and child web components, right? First, it will call the constructor of the parent component. So initially, it will call the constructor of the parent component. And then if there are any public properties available within that specific component, so those public properties will be updated. So when I say public properties, at the rate API properties, whatever you have in your components, so in your code, those things will be updated. If there are something to be updated, those things will be updated. And then, so whatever the code you have written, that will be inserted into the DOM, document object model, right? So without DOM you will not be able to see anything at all, right? So you will be inserting your code into the DOM, and then connected callback is one of the life cycle hook will be called once it is inserted into the DOM. So after that, again it will render the page whatever you have. Until now we won't be able to see any page itself, any output itself on the UI, but behind the scenes these are the things happen. So behind the scenes constructor called, behind the scenes your public properties are called, behind the scenes it is inserted and you have connected callback invoked within it, and then your rendering phase came into the picture, parent is rendered, and then the story is same. It will go to the constructor of child, and in the child again it will update the properties, right? The public properties, whatever you have, those properties will be updated if at all they need to update it, and then it will go to the right. So it will insert that specific component into the DOM, and then connected callback is called, and then child will be rendered, and rendered callback of child is called, and rendered callback on parent is called, and finally it will finish, right? So instead of just looking into the diagram, let's take some examples so that we'll better understand that. So let's have parent and child components, right? As we have some components which we have created already, so we have parent and we have child components. So this is my parent component. So cool. So we have a lot of other methods too. So what I will do, let me bring them down to avoid the confusion, right? So first thing what we discussed is constructor, right? So whenever you create instance for your component, right? So constructor is the one which is being called first. So constructor will call first, and then followed by connected callback, and then followed by a rendered callback, and you have something like disconnected callback as well, but we don't use it much. It's okay. Right, so you have constructor which will get called initially the moment you initialize your component, the moment you start invoking your web component, right? So here thing is like I need to use super keyword. So without super keyword, I won't be able to use my constructor, right? So at this point of time, so your component, whatever you have created, your markup, whatever you have created, that is not inserted into the DOM. This is the first step which get invoked. This is the first like life cycle hook which is get invoked before even it is inserted into the UI. So that means first things start from JavaScript and it will enter into the front end as well. So within this constructor, you are not even inserted your DOM. Your DOM is not at all there. When it comes to the connected callback, right? So here, so DOM is inserted and then this connected callback will be called. Your when I say DOM is inserted, your elements, whatever you have created, those things are inserted into the DOM, inserted into the document, right? So I hope you guys are aware of document, window, object, and all those things. Whatever we are dealing from the UI level, it starts with window and document. Under the document, you have body, header, footers, and under that you will have all the elements. Whatever you see, any page that you take, it contains document, right? So we need to insert our web components into the document. Then only you will be able to see the output, right? So first thing is we need to insert them, right? So in the constructor, so it is created. Basically, your component is created in the constructor. In simple words, I will mention that. So your component is created in the constructor. In the connected callback, insert it into the DOM. In the rendered callback, once right your UI components are rendered for you, it will display for you on the UI. Then this one will get called. Right. So disconnected callback is something the moment you start removing your components from the document, right? Or else if you move from one page to another page, right? During that time, this disconnected callback usually call. So most likely we don't do anything with disconnected callback. We don't touch it, right? But this is a cycle hook which is available for you. So wherein, right, if you want to do something something additionally based on the complexity of your project, you may need to go with disconnected callback. Most likely we don't touch disconnected callback. So primarily what we have is constructor, connected callback, and rendered callback. So connected callback and rendered callback goes hand in hand, because once this connected callback is completed, rendered callback will be displayed. This is before rendering the page, this is after rendering the page. That's the basic uh, a simple tip which we need to remember, right? So it will start with constructor and it will go to the connected callback and it will go to the rendered callback and it will go to the disconnected callback. We have something like error callback as well, right? So again, we don't use that much. So there is something like error callback. So I'm not going to talk about this now. So right. So let's put some console.log to understand which one is being called first. From the constructor. So in other words, from the parent constructor, from the connected callback. On disconnected callback, in our case, we don't see anything output for that. So if we are in Salesforce, move to between multiple pages, then we can see this. So since we are dealing with localhost, we don't have multiple pages. We just have one page, right? So there is no point of keeping this here. So it started with constructor first, and it went to connected callback, and it went to rendered callback. So this is the cycle. So most likely you deal with these three in your project. Most likely you will be dealing with these three things, right? So let's talk about what you can do in the constructor and what you cannot do in the constructor, right? So in the constructor, since you don't have any elements available, they are just created. Component is just created, it is not available in the DOM. You haven't inserted that into the DOM, right? So in that case, right, so if you want to change some of the attributes, so this is not the right place to change it. If you want to change some attributes, this is not right place to change it. Or else if you want to manipulate the DOM with the help of this dot template dot query selector. So this is something like document dot get element by id. This is advanced notation of that. So here we are using this dot template dot query selector. Let's say in your DOM you have something like button. For example, you have something like button, right? So I would like to call this button here, right? So I'm trying to call the button element. I'm trying to call the button element from the constructor. So if I try to do that, it won't work. Reason for that is, so in the constructor, the component itself is not loaded. It is not there on the DOM. How will it get the things from the DOM? See, uh, this dot template dot query selector cannot be called during the construction of the custom element, right? Since nothing is there, so how can it will call those elements? Those elements are not at all there on the UI. So how will it call? Right, this is not possible in the constructor. So if you want to construct some data to initialize the data, let's say you have do init method in Aura components, right? So in the do init method, most likely you construct some data, you get some data, you will go to the server and get some data kind of thing, right? So in those occasions, you can use this constructor for constructing the data to initialize the data. That is one thing. And you should not use return statement. So you can use return statement, but it should be ugly return statement. The moment you start your code, so you might need to use return or return this. This is nothing but this specific constructor. So this return statement also we should not use it. And don't try to edit your uh, attributes. When I say properties, so anything like at the rate API, blah blah blah, this is your property, don't try to edit this in the constructor, right? Cool. So, and it flows from parent to child. It flows from parent to child. First your parent constructor is called, and then only your child constructor is called. So to give that example exactly, I will take this piece of code and go to the child component. So instead of parent, let me call it as child, child, child again, right? So in this situation, right, first your parent constructor is called and then your child constructor is called, right? So here child is embedded within your parent, right? Here you embedded that my child is the child of your parent, right? So you have life cycle hooks in the parent and you have life cycle hooks in the child as well. So what we'll call first is your parent life cycle hooks most likely will call, apart from one specific life cycle hook, which is rendered callback. So this rendered callback so will be from down to top, right, bottom to top. So all these things like constructor, connected callback or disconnected callback, render, whatever you take, error callback, all these things are from top to bottom. And when it comes to the connected callback, this one is first called in the child element and then only it will call in the parent element. So this is from child to parent. So rest these things are from parent to child. The flow is this parent to child, right? So yeah, only rendered callback behaves like it starts from child rendering part and it will go to the right. So parent rendering part. So if you see this life cycle hook, you will see that. So it will go to the rendered callback of child and it will go to the rendered callback on parent, right? Rest of the things are same. They follow the same process. First, parent is inserted into the DOM. So prior to that, constructor of the parent, and then it will insert the things into the DOM, and then connected callback, and parent is rendered, right? And then constructor of child, and it will go to the right connected callback on child, and child is rendered callback of child, and rendered callback on parent. This is the uh, basic process, right? So let me check this cycle over here in the code itself. So what I need to do is let me remove that stuff which is the parent. We used this dot template dot query selected, right? So I will get into the connected callback as well. We'll get into that as well. For now, let me show the flow. So did we save the child? Right. So first your parent constructor and your child constructor, right? So it starts here parent constructor and child constructor, meaning from parent to uh, child it is flowing. This is how the flow is, and connected callback of parent and connected callback of your child. And if you notice that there is some difference here, so rendered callback of child is being called first and rendered callback of parent is called later, right? So only this rendered callback behaves from down to up, right? Rest of the things will call from parent to child. That's the difference. Cool. So let me go back to code. The connected callback, right? So what are the things that we can do in the connected callback? Yeah, you can deal with data in the connected callback. That is pretty much possible. And if you start using right this dot template dot query selected, right, this dot templates dot query selected. Let me give an example. So this one I will try to take it in the, let me put it in the connected callback of your parent. So I would like to access this data, update child method. So for that, I will be giving inner HTML dot inner HTML to access the data. So again, console dot log. So what do you think? Do we get the data? Do we get the data which we are looking for? When I say the data, so do we get the inner HTML if I use this template? Since I have button on my right, one of the element on my UI, right, in the markup, I'm trying to call it in the connected bar, right? So what do you think? Is that something? Are we able to get the data now? So let's check it. Let's check it. So if I go to, right, so let me give this con con connected call back parent. That's what I give. Let's check that. So yeah, so cannot read property inner.html, meaning it won't have anything in that specific document, whatever you see in that specific template. So you don't have anything. So the reason being why we are not able to use this dot template dot right query selector. So we are able to use it, but it always returns null value. So even if I remove this, it is basically null. So and that's why if I try to point to any of the values of that specific element, it will throw the error. So reason being for that is, so in the connected callback, right? So by now your component is inserted into the DOM. That's great, right? So before this connected callback, your component is inserted into the DOM, right? So on the DOM it is there, but it is not rendered. So it is not rendered, it is not displayed. So as long as it is not displayed, it won't be available even in the connected callback. So if at all, if you want to use this dot template dot query selector to get the data of it, so what you need to do is you have to use it in the rendered callback. Rendered callback. So maybe I will remove the inner HTML to avoid the error. It will give the null value, and then it should go to this rendered callback. See, rendered callback is called the template, the one which we kept here. This is being called, and also I'm able to get inner HTML. So inner HTML is update child method. If I go to so parent, so update child method is what my inner HTML. I'm able to access it in the rendered callback, right? So these are the things which we need to remember during the lifecycle hook, which we follow for every component, right?
This conference will now be recorded.
right? So connected callback, your connected callback and rendered callback will call multiple times, right? So based on the data which you are changing it, based on number of times that you are changing the elements, so your connected callback and rendered callback will call multiple times. Constructor will be called once, but when it comes to the connected callback and rendered callback, so they always call multiple times. They always call multiple times, right? If at all, if you want to control it, you don't want to execute the logic in under the connected callback multiple times. If you want to run it only one time, then use boolean operator. First time make it as false, right? When you install it, make it as false, the boolean operator. First time when it runs it, so make it as true, and later onwards, if it is true, let's not enter into the rest of the code. So you can stop it with the help of a boolean operator. So even in the rendered callback or connected callback, wherever you want to use it, so if you want that piece of code logic should not be executed multiple times, and you want to execute that only one time, use boolean operator, where initially make it as true or false, and right. So within that code, once the logic executed, change the flag, right? Based on the flag, rest of the logic needs to be executed. That is what you can do with rendered callback and connected callback in terms of controlling the lifecycle stuff, right? So that is how it works, right? So this is about lifecycle hooks. So I'm going ahead with now, right? So next topic, which is like communication with uh, child to grandparent. So I think this makes sense if I start introducing this uh, child to grandparent. So in the previous session, right, we discussed about how to communicate from child to parent. That is right. So that is what we know already. So now, so how to communicate with grandparent? How to communicate with great grandparent? Right. So those things we need to really understand when you start working on your project. Right. So in the world of like aura components, right, in the world of aura components, so that is straightforward. Anything that you take, any component that you take, so it will propagate to the highest level of your component hierarchy. So maybe for better understanding, so you have one component, so I can say grandparent, and this is a parent component, and within that your child component. So this is the containment hierarchy. And if you want, I will put great grandparent, right? So this is child. So grandparent, great grandparent, whatever, right? So until now, what we discussed, we can communicate from child to parent, right? So when it comes to the aura components, right? So by default, so your events, whatever you create, those will propagate to highest level in the containment hierarchy. Those will propagate to the highest level in the containment hierarchy. This propagation is called bubbling. This propagation is called bubbling phase. So it bubbles up from child component to highest level of your component hierarchy, right? So this is common concept, right? By default in the aura components, it bubbles up. If you want to stop it, you can use even dot stop propagation. Even dot stop propagation is what you need to use in the parent, so that it will not go to the grandparent or great grandparent. So in the aura components, we discussed that topic, right? So that is by default, it is there in the aura components. You can stop it with the help of even dot stop propagation. When it comes to web components, by default it won't bubble up to the highest level of hierarchy because of your shadow DOM. Your shadow DOM will not allow you to enter into the highest level of your components, right? So to allow it, we need to use some additional stuff, right? So let me create a great grandparent, not great grandparent, grandparent components. So maybe I will quickly do that. So where is this? Under my, I won't take much time for this. So GP, let me put it at GP to make it simple. Under this file gp.html, so gp.js, right? This is my grandparent. So now within my grandparent, right? So let me quickly take the piece of code, right? So I'm calling the parent in the grandparent, and for this stuff, I will just copy it for saving our time. So it should start with capital letter GP, and I don't need this API here in the grandparent. So rest everything should be fine. So as it starts with in app.html, when it comes to the open source, I need to change it here. So instead of my parent, so I will start with grandparent. My dot, my dash GP. So now it starts from grandparent and parent and child. This is what we have. So cool. So are we getting the output still? So missing element template tag in gp.html. I think we did not save it. Cool. So now we are starting from grandparent, right? So we are starting from grandparent. So in the child, we are actually firing the event, right? So this is a child. In the JS, we are actually, upon clicking the button, we are firing the event. See here, we are clicking update parent. So that is what we are clicking. So upon clicking that, we are basically calling this method. And so earlier, I don't have this bubbles equal to bubbles true and composed it true, right? If I remove these statements, it only bubbles up. So it only available to the parent component. It won't be available to the great grandparent or parent. It won't bubble up throughout the complete containment hierarchy, right? So to make it true, to bubble it up throughout the containment hierarchy, you need to use these statements. So which is bubbles true and compose true, right? So if we use bubbles true and compose equal to true, then it bubbles up to the highest level containment hierarchy. So now if I go to my great grandparent, so just grandparent, right? So where is that? This is the one right here. I can handle that specific method, whatever you are firing from there, that specific event, whatever you are firing from there. So how to call it now? the story is same. The story is same, right? Currently, parent, in the parent, you are calling it, right? In the parent, you are just using on and the method name. So, I mean, event name. So, this is the syntax which you use. So, you can pretty much take the same syntax. You can pretty much take the same syntax and go to your so grandparent and here so on update me is the event, right? The event name which you have custom event, and now you have gp fun whatever you have. I'm just having gp fun. So let me go to here. So to identify whether it is called or not completely, I'm just coming here. Let me put console.log console.log and right. So now we have grandparent methods. So this one should get called if we are able to communicate from child to grandparent, right? So this one should get called. So let's try to execute that. Before that, let me check my code one more time. So this should be fine. And the child, so this should be fine. Bubbles true, compose true, fine. Along with your detail, whatever you have. So now if I click on this update print, right? So my parent function should grandparent function should be called. See, grandparent is called, meaning that you are able to communicate with your grandparent also. Even though you don't have anything, right? In your grandparent, you don't have this update method. In your my print, you don't have update method. Update me, right? This is not there in your my parent, in your parent. But still, so because of bubbling concept, you are able to handle it. So from the child, so you can handle it in the grandparent, great grandparent also. You can handle it great great grandparent also. Still it bubbles up, right? So in this way you can achieve this requirement. So uh, another thing in terms of bubbling concept, right? Bubbling is not just for component hierarchies, right? See here, if you see this, child is one component, which is your web component. Parent is another web component. GP is one web component. GGP is another web component, right? So this is so we have bubbling concept here. So bubbling concept is not just limited for the different custom elements which you have created. So within the same templates, let's say this is your template, right? One template, one custom component, assuming that this is child component. So within the child component, you might have something like body. Body is one of the standard element. So you might have something like body. Body is one of the tag, and within that you might have some div element, and within that you might have some span element, and within that you might have one paragraph element. You notice that these are the standard elements: body, div, span, p. These are the standard elements, right? So this is also kind of hierarchy, right? So from paragraph, right? From paragraph, if we do something, right? This data, if you want to propagate it to the span, and from span to div, and div to body, and from body to highest level component, whatever you have, right? So this propagation is also called as bubbling concept, right? It's not just limited to multiple components. It is also uh, right, part of your any given component that you take, right? Let's say you click something in the parent and you want to handle it in the body, or you want to handle it in the development. So most likely, right, so you might not work these kind of scenarios, but this is one scenario which is available. So this is also bubbling up. Within the same template you have bubbling concept, and within multiple containment hierarchy you have bubbling concept. So you can bubble up within the same template as well. You can also bubble up outside the template. When I say outside template, in the containment hierarchy also. So this concept is applied for both. So bubbling concept. So there is no such thing like capture phase in uh, web components, right? So maybe I need to show some example to you. Let's see example. I need to show one image if I can get it. Yeah. So anything is fine. Right. Here, if you notice that, so there are two phases. One is bubble phase, right? If you notice that, so from child component F is a child component. It bubbles up to the parent component. So, and from here it bubbles up to its parent component, and from here it bubbles up to the parent component. Meaning from down to up you are going ahead, right? So this is basically bubbling from down to highest level component. You are bubbling up, and there is one more phase, right, which is capture phase, which is from parent to child. See, from component A to component B, so it triggered, and component B to component E it triggered, and from component A to component F it is triggered, right? So this phase is applicable in Aura components, this capture phase, whereas this phase is not applicable in the Lightning web components. So only bubbling is there in the web components, and even that too, you have to make it as true by with the help of your code. You have to make it as true, and you need to make it as compose true. Then it will be available as a bubbling event. So capture phase is not at all applicable in the web component world, and bubble concept is still there in the world of web component. So that is how you communicate from child to parent and grandparent or great grandparent and so on, whatever, wherever you want to use it, you can still do that. So yeah.
This conference will now be recorded.
So now I would like to talk about the concept of slots, right, which is very important in the world of web components, right? So you might remember, right, in your aura components, you might remember your aura components. We use some of the concept like v dot body. So v dot body, let's say you have one component, assuming that, so you have one parent component, and it ends with aura component, and aura component, whatever. And from here, in the aura component, you will call your child component c colon child. So you will not end the tag like this. Instead of ending the tag in one single line, so what you do, you will create body for it. So within the body, you will place the data, some HTML data or whatever the data, right? Some from the parent, whatever, right? So this data, in order to use this data in the C child, which is a child component, so to use that, so we use a concept called v dot body, right? So we use concept called v dot body. So here what we are trying to achieve is, so from the parent, so instead of supplying the parameters like this, att equal to blah blah blah, instead of passing parameters like this, so you are placing your data within your body of your child component. You are creating body, right? Instead of closing the tag in just one single line, you are creating body for it. So you are creating body. When I say body, this is the body of your child stuff. So whatever the data that you provide over here, so you can use it in the child component, right? So I hope this concept everyone is aware of it, or else I will just create one simple component which doesn't take much time for us. So lightning component, so I will give it a child body, a proper name for it. And let me create one our application. I will treat this as parent, our application as parent. Right, within my R applications in general, if you want to call your another component, right, tail component, whatever the component you would like to call, you will be using C colon and your child body, whatever the component name you have, and you will close it in this line itself. Right, if at all, if you want to supply some data, you will give att equal to some data, whatever you want to supply it. You can pass this data to the att, which child body contains it. So your child body, if at all it contains att as attribute, you can supply some data from here. So this is how we used to do it in general, right? So on top of it, the advanced approach is this, right? So instead of closing in a single line, so you will create body for it. So still it is parent data only, parent data one or whatever you get. This is the parent data. So, but you are placing that parent data in the child body. The child body you are placing it. So now if I try to view it, so I won't get parent data. It's taking time to load. So I won't get this parent data one, because in order to access the parent data, whatever the data being placed within the body of child body, right, I need to use v dot body. Remember, v dot body is what I need to use in order to access it. So now let me try to access it. So now you got parent data. So from where you are getting this data? You are getting it from the parent. So instead of passing the data as attributes, you are passing the data in the body of your child component. You are keeping the data in the body of your child component, right? So the same concept, right? So is applied to the concept of slots, right? The same concept is applied here. Slots also work like this, like that. So in the world of slots, right, you will have the parent. Under the child, you need to have something like slots, right? You need to place some slots in the child, assuming. So this parent. So I will remove this slot, this parent component, and you have child component here. So from the parent, you would like to supply some of the HTML stuff to the child, right? So parent, child, right? So to supply HTML stuff or some data to the child, right? So what you need to have is you should have some slots. So this one slot you can insert some data into this slot. There is a slot in the child. There is one slot in the child. There is one slot in the child, right? So every slot will have one name. Let's say I will give F1 as one slot. F2 is another slot, or F3 is another slot. So based on the slot name, you can enter data from parent to child. If you want to enter the data only in F3, you need to mention slot name equal to F3 in parent so that you can enter the data just in this slot, right? So just in this slot, you will be able to enter the data. Let's say from parent, I would like to pass right the HTML into a F2 slot. So all I need to do is I need to call this F2 in the parent so that that data is inserted into the F2. So we call this concept as named slots because you have some name F1, F2, F3 are the names available. So if you don't have any names in your child component, there are no names at all, then by default it takes unnamed slot. So there is no name. So if there is one slot is available, in that slot it will be inserted. In that slot the data will be inserted. In general you will have only one unnamed slot or you won't have anything at all. That is how you develop the components, right? So to bring life to this diagram whatever we have, so let me quickly create a couple of components, right? So within no time, let's try to create as fast as possible. So let me create p1 and some name to couple of components. New folder, parent. For slot example, I'm just going parent slot kind of thing. JS point. So now I need child to give this example. So for that, child slot, HTML. child slot js. That's cool. So you have parent and child. So in the child, let me create the template first, build initial structure of it, javascripting stuff. So name should be child slot. Let me give same thing to the parent as well. So p this. So this is parent slot. P should be caps for the class, and markup. So we have initial mockups available now. Cool. So child slot JS saved, parent slot parent HTML. Cool. So now now my concept is I would like to pass some data to the child. Right. That is what I have. Currently, I'm in the parent slot. Parent slot. So I would like to pass some metadata or some elements to the child. For that reason, so I will call my child first. Right. So this is the body of my child now. So within the body of my child, so I would like to pass some paragraph. From the parent, we are passing data. Right, same concept even in the RR, right? The same thing which we did, right? So from the parent, we are passing data which we have. So now if we try to view it, we won't be able to see the data. So what I need to have in the child is from the parent, you are supplying it fine, but in the child slot, if I go to my child slot, here I need to use something like slot. This is what I'm talking about. So you need to have slot elements available in your child template. In your child template, you should have some slots as we discussed here. F1, F2, F3, these are the slots available, right? So the slot which I created is this unnamed slot. I don't have any name at all. If there is no name, by default it will take into unnamed slot. If there is only one slot, right, it will take into that. Now let me try to call my uh, component which I have created, which is parent slot, right? So to call it, I will go to the app.html as usual. So currently I'm going to so comment it out this GP, my GP kind of thing. So now I need to call parent. So if everything is fine, I should be able to see some data. Where is this? Yeah, from the parent, we are passing data, right? So this data is entered into the slot where you kept it in the child. So in the child, you allotted some slot to it. So that slot is taking the data, right? So you can also have named slots. So any given component, you can have only one unnamed slot, right? So you can, if you want more number of slots, you have to keep more number of named slots, right? So to give the named slot, what you need to do is you need to mention some name for it. That's it. Slot. So this is your name slot. So now I can enter my data only into this. So for example, I will give some B as bold. So in this place, in this area, whatever you have, so I can pass my metadata or element from parent to child based on the name slot. So there is one name slot. Which one? So whatever the name, I give F1, F2, whatever the name. Now I can insert only into the slots where I would like to put it. So that's it. So to do that from the parent, so right, while you are inserting it, you need to mention the slot name here. Let's say I would like to pass the data to the F1, some data, so some span, and here you need to use slot equal to fn, fn or f1, the named slot whichever you have in the child, and yeah, parent span. Right now, this span element will sit into the slot one, which is f1. If I keep slot equal to f2, this will sit into the f2 slot. So this is how you create slots here. So let's try to, so this is parent span, right? So this is basically sitting in the f1 slot. So if you want to have the slot 2, so f2 slots, so again the story is same, nothing different. F2 span, or you can use div element, anything. It's not one specific element. Any element you take it, you can just mention the slot, so it will sit into the slot. So parent f2 span. So this is basically coming from the child. So you are inserting into the child slot from the parent, right? So now the actual story comes into the picture. You are inserting it like this. That's great. So can I access this element with the help of template.query selector? So since these are available in the child, right? This span, this div element, this right, this p, these are now physically available in the slots, right? In the child slot, in the child slot, they are available now. Even though here it doesn't looks like they are available, from our code we made it work, right? We made it work. We replace these slots with those things. So now if I want to access the span element or p element, whatever I have in the child, right? Most likely you need to access your template stuff in the rendered callback. This is the right place because your elements are already rendered, right? So here I will try to access console dot. I will try to access those span elements and on p element or div element which is inserted from parent. From parent to insert in the child. In the child, I would like to get that specific attribute or that specific element. So now I would like to do this. This dot template dot query selector. So now I would like to access the span element or div element, whatever it is, right? So is it possible to access it? Is it possible to access it in the chain since it is there in the body now, right? So is it possible to access this span kind of thing,
This conference will now be recorded.
right? So this dot template dot query selector, in general, it won't be right. It won't allow you to access the elements which are inserted with the help of slots, right? Reason being that is physically these things are not there in the DOM elements of your child. So you will, it is not there in the template of your child. This is not there in the template of your child. If it is there in the template of your child, right, within this template you can access it, but physically they are not there. Logically they are available. So right, to access those things, right, so what you need to do, you need to avoid this template. This dot query selector is what you need to use. This is the only place, guys. So remember this simple tip. This is the only place where you will be avoiding template for selecting query selector with by going with query selector, right? Wherever you have slots, and those slots which are inserted from the parent, for those things you will avoid the template. If you have some elements already available, let's say in the child, right, in the child you have some element p is already there. So to access this p, yes, you can use this dot template dot query selector, because this is already there in the template body. In the template body it is there, you can use this dot query selector. As long as it is not there in the template body, so physically, then so you need to remove this template. This dot template is not applicable. You need to use this dot query selector, and you are pointing to that, you can get the data whatever you want to get it. So for me, I will get inner HTML. So I will try to get inner HTML. We'll see if it really works. So we'll flip the code, and we'll see how exactly it works, right? So span query selector. So you got parent span. This is the data which we supplied from the parent. So if at all, if I try to use this dot template, so we'll see what we get. So we got error message expected. So cannot read property inner HTML of null. So this is just I used inner.html. By default it is null, right? So template.query selector is itself null. So there is no point to enter into the multiple levels, right? So this is not available physically. So as we are using slots, this right. So we should avoid this template because it is not there as part of your template. So once you remove that, you will be able to access it. So that is how the slots work, right? So that's it in this session. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day. Bye bye.